The nuclear submarine is the ultimate apex predator.
Peter Malinauskas is the Premier of South Australia, and that means more than anyone else, he's focused on the future of how Australia will defend itself.
The moment a nuclear submarine enters the water, it immediately and fundamentally tilts the balance of power. In an instant, it recalibrates every geopolitical relationship around it.
Australia's committed to borrow, buy and then build nuclear-powered subs as part of AUKUS, our strategic pact with the US and Britain. They'll be built and sustained in South Australia, and they're designed to deter our enemies from attacking and allow us to attack far beyond our shores. Nuclear-powered subs are almost silent under the water and can stay submerged for months on end. That makes them a stealth weapon.
We are wise to acquire this power. But to achieve this, we must change our thinking about AUKUS and what it means for our nation.
Malinauskas is talking at Defending Australia, a summit in Canberra held by the Australian and our fellow mastheads at News Corp Australia, including The Advertiser.
So in Newport News in Virginia, where they build nuclear submarines, they've got over 20,000 people that work there. 1,000 of those people individually have over 40 years' experience building nuclear submarines themselves. 1,000 people with over 40 years of experience building nuclear submarines every single day of their working lives. Do you know how many of those people that we have working at Osborne or ASC? None.
He says we need an entirely new workforce, tens of thousands of people to work on the submarines directly. But that's not all.
Now, we can't employ these people as other foreign nationals for security reasons that are well known in this room. We can't even really poach them from the US and the UK because that would be in breach of the very principles that AUKUS has been there to design about uplift across the three nations rather than an internal poaching exercise.
That means we need to train Australians, and thousands of them will need to be recruited from other sectors.
We need sparkies, we need plumbers, we need fitters, we need turners, we probably need butchers, bakers and candlestick makers. And as we seek to recruit those from existing industries, who is going to backfill that labour?
Because if you haven't noticed, Australia already has a critical worker shortage in sectors like construction.
Right now, first and foremost, Australia does not have a migration problem. We have a housing supply problem.
That housing supply problem is why both the government and opposition say they need to slash migration, because Australians can't find somewhere to live.
Without a healthy influx of skilled migrants, our nation is not the country that we know today, nor will be the country we want it to be tomorrow. So I would say to my Canberra colleagues that AUKUS must be a consideration in deliberations over Australia's skilled migration program. But more than that, AUKUS must be a consideration in just about every area of policy. When we think about housing, what does it mean for AUKUS? When we think about infrastructure, what does that mean for AUKUS? When we think about education, health and innovation policy, what does that mean for AUKUS?
I sat down with Peter Malinauskas on stage at the Defending Australia Summit on Tuesday night.
The British High Commissioner gave you and everybody else in the room today a bit of a warning not to come poaching their staff. You'd made the right noises about that in your speech too, saying that that would be in breach of the spirit of the AUKUS Pact. But if, talented British nuclear physicists want to move to Adelaide and have a wonderful life there, are you going to turn them down?
Well, I'll tell a story that I probably shouldn't. The optimal pathway was announced by the Prime Minister and the British Prime Minister and the US President, and 72 hours later, I was on the ground in Barrow, touring their facility, which is very impressive indeed. But the most powerful part to me was actually going through their equivalent of the Training and Skills Academy. And I got to talk to young workers learning their craft to build the nuclear submarines in the UK. And I'm saying to them, would you like to come and work in Adelaide. Like Barrow, if you haven't pictured it, it's
bleak.
It's different, right? So I'm saying to these kids, you know, like Adelaide's got beaches, we've got wineries, it's a major metropolitan city, you know, we've got lots of festivals and events. I said, would you like to come? And one after the other saying, oh yeah, that sounds pretty good. Anyway, Stephen Smith grabbed me by the arm. We sort of had a quiet moment. He grabbed me by the arm and with a degree of force, which you wouldn't think Stephen is necessarily capable of, with a degree of force said, shut up. With a little other word in between shut and up. And he said, this isn't part of the deal. Well, this is a problem. And I remember that clearly because it was the early stages of the optimal pathway announcement, and it is a critical principle that we've signed up to that is not about poaching. It is about industrial uplift across the three countries, which means we have to accept a profound responsibility that we are developing and procuring our own workforce domestically at home. And as has been identified in all the panels tonight, it is the fundamental challenge, it is the single biggest risk to the program. I think that in turn invites a nationally coordinated effort about how we're going to develop that workforce, because it's not just about my state. This is not an industrial policy for South Australia or Western Australia. We are at full employment. We're not trying to work out how to make more work, we're trying to work out how we get the work done. And that is going to require a lot more uplift from the eastern states in a way that I don't think has fully been computed up until this point.
Coming up, a former Chinese spy reveals what China really thinks about Australia. We'll be back after this break. In 2020, as the pandemic raged, Australian journalist Chang Lei was detained in China. Here she is describing her ordeal on Sky News Australia.
It's to make you feel isolated and bored and pained and desperate. My experience was the first 5 months I got to read books and I had a pen and paper with which to write, and that was much less painful than the final month of just 12 hours a day of pure sitting and very little chance to get up and just walk, just pace around a very little room. Every dream was a nightmare.
Almost 3 years later, and following extensive diplomatic manoeuvring by Foreign Minister Penny Wong, Lei was finally freed.
More than 1,000 days behind bars. Today, freedom. Australian journalist Chang Lei embraced by Foreign Minister Penny Wong at Melbourne Airport this afternoon.
Now Chang Lei is working as an anchor on Sky News. And on Tuesday, she moderated a panel at the Defending Australia Summit on conflicts past, present and potentially future. She was joined by Senator Dave Sharma, Ukrainian Ambassador Vasyl Moroshenko, and a former spy for the Ministry of Public Security for the People's Republic of China. We're calling him Eric to protect his identity.
Now, 2 points I want to make at the top. One is an ex-con, an ex-spy, 2 diplomats on a stage talking freely without fear. That's what we're defending. You know, when Eric's story came out, everyone who I knew said, he has balls. So I want to ask you, Eric, what exactly did you do or were you forced to do for the government?
Eric explained he had 3 main tasks as a spy: writing intelligence reports, gathering information about opponents of the Chinese Communist Party, and dealing with targets.
But relax, I have protected all the targets, and no one has been arrested because of me. And a lot of evidence can prove that. I have my own secret, and the secret police don't know.
Chang Lei translated some of the panel's questions for Eric and his responses in real time.
Right. And you were forced into this because you supported a dissident movement. Is that correct? 就是您当时是因为支持了民运，所以才被逼做这样的事情，对吗？
Yes, correct.
Senator Dave Sharma jumped in.
Well, look, firstly, Eric, I commend you for your personal bravery. It must have taken a huge amount of courage. Can I ask, what was it that triggered your decision to leave your employment, seek asylum in a country like Australia? Was it something you were particularly asked to do? Had you lost faith in the political system, or you had ethical or moral concerns with what you were being asked to do?
其实我第一个选择的是加拿大，不是澳大利亚。
He actually chose Canada first. So on the same day, he got 2 emails, a rejection from Canada, acceptance from Australia. He also applied to New Zealand, but then he tossed a coin to decide between Australia and New Zealand.
关于我为什么要逃离，首先一点，我本身就是一个反共。
So he's always been anti-CCP, Chinese Communist Party. That's in his DNA. And he had his own secrets in that the first time he sought to escape, he went to Hong Kong and sought assistance at the US consulate. And more secrets about that will be revealed in due course. And the second escape, also the Chinese secret police didn't know about. Then he did some really genuine anti-CCP work that started to attract the interest of the Beijing HQ of the secret police. And that's when he felt the danger and he started to plot his way out. So what you told us was that you were asked to collect information, to monitor and also try to abduct Chinese dissidents in other countries. How concerned should Western governments be about that?
我觉得其实西方的很多政治家其实可能并不是很关心这一点。
So he says that Western politicians are usually not concerned about these behaviors. They think it's all within Chinese people, but in fact, the CCP's attempt to control voices in the Chinese community actually then, in turn, affects voting in those countries and influences politics. So that does erode rights in Western countries and should be something that we're all concerned about. What does the Chinese secret police think of Australia or those people that you worked with?
实话说，秘密警察官员其实很少谈到澳大利亚。
So in his dealings with the Chinese secret police, they don't talk about Australia much, but in his engagements with Chinese officials and others, they seem to think of Australia as a country without sovereignty, that it's not worth fighting against, that should there ever be a day of China-US conflict, then all they need to do is intimidate and coerce Australia, and Australia will stay neutral until China wins, and then Australia will obey.
Say more?
Sure.
我注意到在澳洲的
So he's noticed that among academics and some people in the strategy sphere, that people seem to think if there is a China-US conflict, that Australia should not take sides. And he doesn't know whether these voices are being funded by China. But he thinks if Australia stands by and not help the US, it's going to be the start of Australia's nightmare.
New South Wales Police say a strike force into the suspected murder of missing mum Bronwyn Winfield is open and ongoing. She's the subject of the Australian's new investigative podcast series, Bronwyn. You can register to listen to the first 2 episodes right now at bronwynpodcast.com. That's BRONWYN podcast.com. And join our subscribers for all the nation's best journalism at theaustralian.com.au.